For me, COVID had a huge impact. For almost 2 years, I did not physically go to church. It was my regret. I should have been going back much earlier than I did, but I've never looked back. Good morning, my name is Andy. I've had major surgery on my left foot, and now I have to be off my feet for 8 weeks. But I am looking forward to the day when I can be walking around again normally. I first was going to BBC back in 1977, and BBC has done a particularly good job, if I can say so, of addressing all the different aspects of a family unit. Teenagers, little kids, you name it. So BBC just became our home, from home. Had the privilege of serving as an elder at the church. Then I eventually retired. I was dialing in online, but it's just not the same. The praise and worship, it's just not the same. And I was challenged by my children late last year about why am I not going back to church, because COVID had sort of settled down and become a way of life. I did eventually go back to BBC, probably about March, April timeframe. It was a whole new church. After two and a half years, I only knew a fraction of the people there, but instantly I was enjoying being there in the service, not only hearing the preaching firsthand, but also enjoying the praise and worship that took place, and it just couldn't compare to online. And for me, it was never a turning back point, because it just reaffirmed in my mind and heart the importance of community. We as human beings, we're geared to be with one another. That's how God made us. And so having the companionship of other people is an important part of our lives, not just in our own direct family, but at a greater circle. And God's word encourages us as well to meet together as often as possible. And why is that? Because He encourages us to exhort one another, encourage one another, share with each other the circumstances that we're going through in our lives. But I'm also aware of the challenges that the church went through, as did other churches, with finances. You know, COVID definitely had an impact on that. But it not only survived, it has flourished. And so though there's been change, new people are coming in. So I was encouraged to see all the facets of the church still functioning as they did before. Just that there's been a change of people, but you can see the joy of the Lord on their faces, and they love to come to church.
So what would your encouragement to people?
Go to church. Go to church. Don't find excuses that you can't be there. It's good for you. And when you are doing it, you soon realize you should have been doing it a long time ago, and that was my regret. I should have been going back much earlier than I did, but I've never looked back. And so having that community, that fellowship, connecting with one another, it's very, very valuable in our lives as we live day by day. God's hand is upon BBC, there's no doubt about it. And it continues to be blessed by God, and so we just delighted to be part of that.
Morning, BBC. My name is David, and I've been coming to BBC for a little bit under a year now. Started off in January after having moved from Pretoria, finished university there, and made my way to Johannesburg to start with work and to figure out life in the big city, quote unquote. But when I first came to Johannesburg, when I first came to BBC, I was struggling quite a bit. I was transitioning out of a church and out of a social circle that I really loved and held dear to my heart. And I always thought of myself as a fairly socially flexible kind of person, be able to get into a good routine and find friends and be able to thrive in a new area. But that was not to be the case when I moved to Johannesburg. The transition and the new people, the new faces, having to say hello to everyone every day and introducing yourself to a new person every day was quite frankly overwhelming, and it was really hard. I'd never been an anxious person, but I became one. I'd never been a person who struggled with loneliness, but I became one. I always felt comfortable to say that I enjoy being alone, or I enjoy spending time by myself. But there were days when I dreaded having to come home and face the prospect of being by myself. But I was not totally alone. God was kind in blessing me with a lot of friends, with community. My girlfriend was here in Johannesburg as well, which was a great blessing. But the shock to the system of having to relocate cities was very taxing on my soul. The only thing that made the move to Johannesburg bearable was having Paul's homemade ice cream a little bit closer to home. But also the hope of being able to experience life in a new church, in a new area, was something that really gave me encouragement. But after a while of coming to church every Sunday, week in, week out, and still struggling to call BBC my home, I'd essentially moved into the church, but I'd never unpacked my bags. It was unsettling. My heart was restless. I was struggling to serve and get plugged into the church. And after a while of praying about this, I ended up having a conversation with a pastor friend of mine from Pretoria, and he said something that was really convicting. He said to me, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit and adding on to a little bit what he had said, but essentially what he had said was, fellowship with the saints is sweeter when you get plugged in and actively start doing life with the people around you. God is big enough to take care of the social, racial, cultural barriers that we face in the church. And you can take heart in the knowledge that the Jesus in you is the same Jesus as the Jesus in the people at BBC. So in that period, it was close to maybe March, April time, God really started working, and there was a GC event, a GC kickoff event, I think it was, at the beginning of the year. And I sent the email to Joe and myself and my girlfriend as well. We made the trip over to church to try and find community, to try and get plugged into the church. And little did I know that in that evening, that meeting that we had upstairs, the people that God was introducing me to were really going to become a beautiful vehicle of showing God's grace and God's kindness and plugging me into the church. And the experience of being part of a local body really came into head. I think it was maybe a few months ago when we had the announcements in our GC that people were leaving. The Livies had started the process of relocating to Cape Town. Travis and Lauren as well also answered the call of God to take their family and go to Canada. And I felt a real sadness. I felt a real heartache that these people that I had only known for a couple of months were now leaving. They were moving on to what God had called them to. And in that moment, I realized that God had helped me to unpack my bags and call BBC my home. I finally felt comfortable to get excited to go to church because I knew that I had community, I had a faith community waiting for me at BBC. I want to serve here, I want to love here, and I want to be able to exercise my faith and live out my faith with the people here at BBC.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I've been coming to BBC for about 5 years. I come with my two children, Sophie and James, and they are 8 and 10 and are often around Kids Church. And I help out on the Noah's Ark side.
So tell me a little bit what maybe your kids thought about Holiday Club, what you thought as parents about Holiday Club.
I think the whole build-up was just so exciting that everyone was talking about it. Everyone was asking, are you going, are you going? I'd taken some flyers to school, and that also drummed up a bit of sort of excitement in the class that people were asking each other, are you going to BBC's Holiday Club? Oh, I was thinking about it, are you? And it sort of created a bit of an atmosphere about it, which was also lovely. So these friends, they're Christian, and they just didn't have a home church. They weren't attending a church on a regular basis, and I'd sort of invited them once or twice or said to bring your kids, and we never sort of got round to it, for want of a better word. And Holiday Club came up, or Kids Holidays came up, and as parents they were trying to juggle how they're going to manage work and kids off, and I'd suggested the BBC Holiday Club. And so the mum actually signed them up for 2 days. And she was like, great, let's try it out. And 2 turned into 3, which turned into 4, which turned into the whole week. And the kids absolutely loved it. They couldn't get enough. I mean, when we all picked up the kids on the Friday, they were pulling on their parents' arms, going, we're coming on Sunday, please can we come, we've got more to learn. And I just thought, wow, how amazing is that? And I mean, the holiday club was end of June, July, and they've been coming to BBC ever since. This is now their church, and they are regular attendees here, which I just think is amazing. So much so, about a month ago, the mom and I were chatting to another friend about the carols coming up in December, and we were talking about when it is, what they're singing, and how excited everyone is. And she referred to BBC as our church, talking about the two of us. And I just thought, how special, like it's completely turned in 5 months. And she's now referring to it as her church, and this is now our church. And we get to come together and worship together, and our kids get to have a great time in kids' church together.
Lindsay, do you think your kids will come again?
Oh my gosh, definitely. They cannot wait. As I said earlier, they just absolutely loved it. They asked if it was running in December. So if it runs next June, July, they will definitely be here.
Okay.
Good morning, church. We the Smiley Sisters. That was our maiden surname. People often call us the Smiley Girls or the Smiley Sisters. And my name is Charisse. This is my sister Erin and my sister Caitlin. And we've been part of the BBC community for about the past 7 years. And today we'd like to share with you our story and how COVID impacted our family. In December 2020, our parents tested positive for COVID, and it was quite challenging for us as they were admitted into 2 different hospitals. We struggled to get communication from doctors. We couldn't visit them. Sorry. In January, the 6th of January 2021, Erin received a call that our mom was doing well and she should be discharged the next day. The following day, Erin received the call in the hope that our mom was being discharged, but Erin was told that she had passed away. We were facing this road of grief which we couldn't walk on because we had to still focus on my dad. He was still alive. He didn't know my mom had passed. And we still had to be hopeful for him. And 6 days later, Erin received the call that our dad wasn't doing well and that if we could get to the hospital, they would try and help us say goodbye. And my dad was in an ICU COVID ward where no visitors were allowed. And just with God's favor, all 3 of us were able to say goodbye to our dad. We left the hospital feeling numb, lost, asking ourselves, what now? And we had this road of grief ahead of us, where we had to face grieving 2 parents who had passed away and just trying to find a new normal. And in July 2021, Caitlin lost her father-in-law to COVID as well. So us as a family really felt the impact of COVID in a way we never thought we would.
Grief is so hard. I mean, we the Smileys, we can't be sad. So that was really tough because we those like half cup, cup full kind of people. And it was really tough just having to experience grief and also try feel the feels. But church was also so tough because our parents were the most plugged in people. They were just these powerhouses, and church was this reminder of home. It was coming here, and we just like every hymn, we would be like in tears, and it was just became quite tough. And we kept feeling ourselves pull away from church because it was this reminder, but yet this voice we all felt, the Holy Spirit saying, come back, this is home. And
And that was really tough. I think also mothering through grief, Erin and I are moms, and that was really hard. And I think it's hard now. We feel like this year has even been harder because our children are growing. You know, they're asking more questions. They have fond memories of our parents. But yet they're this light. As much as they have sadness, they have so much light, and they remind us of what a beautiful life our parents gave us, you know, and gave them, and life continues. So them, you know, getting us to come here every Sunday, they love kids' church, was just wonderful. And it helped us, you know, plug in again. I mean, we've been coming for years, and we had kind of disconnected a bit to the church. But I think realizing that as much as grief and sin is so heavy and it feels so hard some days, God is just so much bigger. And it's just, I don't know, I think if you focus on that light, it really, really helps in your journey. For the three of us, the two pivotal moments this year was the Easter service and the Life of Significance series. We were just incredibly challenged to really just plug in. And I think all of us reflecting back, it's just wonderful to see how God used us, how his hand was at work all the time, even though we didn't feel it all the time. His hand was at work.
I think the fact that we might feel so lost, God actually never leaves us. And you just struggle to hear him in the darkness, because grief is darkness. And when you start dealing with you and all your emotions, and you start getting still, you start letting go. And that letting go is letting go of anger, letting go of abandonment, because we're now orphans. The fact that you're still alive and that you actually can still live is quite a thing to work your head around. When you let go of the noise that surrounds you, you start hearing and seeing the Lord's hand in certain situations. And that is comforting. But you got to get there to see it and hear it. But how you choose to live was a question that all three of us were challenged and faced with. We, for the first time, are living a life for God's purpose, and not a life to which we think our parents would be proud of us for. Just want you to think about that. Because how many of us live a life for someone else, for someone else's approval, for someone else's acknowledgement, where our life should only be focused on what God thinks of us and how God can use us. Living a life of significance challenged us and our way of thinking. And God started showing us that he's always been in control. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, and plans to give you hope and a future." And that's always been a verse so central to us as a family. But for the first time, we actually understand the words. Our parents were never afraid of dying. They lived a life for the church. They were the church planters. They were the foundation of a church. My mom played the piano. She learned to play the organ because somebody wasn't on playing the organ. My dad just ran a Sunday school like you've never seen in your life. We were always involved in church. And they were so certain of where they were going. They lived a life that was just true to every word in their death. And that really challenged our legacy as children. That how amazing is it when someone can say something about your parents with them not there and you know exactly it is true? How many of us can say that when we die? One of the last messages my mom sent via WhatsApp was, I pray that the Lord uses this as a testimony for his glory. And she sent that to multiple people. And even in her eyes, we knew we were going to lose my dad, but we never knew we were going to lose my mom. But yet she was so faithful in the Lord. And that was just such a comfort when we can go back and read her testimony to others while she's the one on her hospital bed. She's the one encouraging my dad. She's the one encouraging us. Grief just changes the lens that you view life through, and you'll never be the same. You can stay in a life of pain and of hurt and of anger and destruction, or you can choose to walk the path of being a light and a comfort and a support for others and live a life of impact. And a lot of people felt really sorry for us. I think we felt sorry for ourselves as well. But to know that this can be a testimony for his glory goes far bigger than we could ever have thought. So if you're sitting in a world of darkness and you're sitting in a world of pain and you don't know how to get out of it because when you're in there, you can't see any light, I challenge you today to take check of how do you want people to remember you in your death, and start living a life of that so that when you die, because we will all die, you know you and your words to be true in your death.